thumbnail sketch of who I am, as a start. When I was 19 years old, I got drafted into the Army after Pearl Harbor. I wanted to join the Army. I was 17, but I needed my father's signature, and he said, absolutely not, because he had experience in Poland with the Army, and no matter what, he wouldn't sign. So I had to wait until I was drafted. I played drums and started at an early age of 13. I used to work up in the Catskill Mountains and playing jobs all over town. So in the war, when I went into service, all my friends were playing in a band in Newport News, Virginia. And they said, we're going to request you so you can play in the band with us. But the outfit I got into was a very special outfit. Nobody ever got out for officers training. Nobody ever left it for any reason whatsoever. What we were the combat engineers. Combat engineers was a new kind of force that we built bridges, we blew up bridges, we laid landmines, we picked up landmines to make people safe, passing these certain fields. And that's what we did. And we did that, and we were shipped over to England, and when the invasion started, D-Day, is anybody familiar with D-Day? D-Day? Not at all. D-Day was June the 6th of 1943, which was the invasion of France. We went into Cherbourg because we were fighting Hitler. And Hitler owned France, he owned Denmark, he owned half of Europe. And we made an invasion. The invasion started early in the morning, 6 in the morning. I had fellows in my squad that landed on the beach 4 hours before H hour, which was 6. Our boat that we were on, a ship, troop ship, was in the English Channel, and it was one of the 2 boats that was sunk by the Germans in the English Channel. When our boat was hit, we had to disembark, get off the boat, and jump onto boats that surrounded our boat, which was listing before it went under, and we all jumped up into these different boats. We had to leave all our equipment, all our guns and ammunition, our helmets, everything that we had, backpacks in the hold of the ship, and that went down with the ship. Now we had no armaments, so I figured, this is okay, we're going to go to England. We're going back to England, so we won't have to do this war thing. But that's not the way it went. They decided that we should, instead of going on to Omaha Beach, which was highly defended by the Germans, and it was a very tough area for the Allied soldiers, we were sent to Utah Beach, which allowed us to enter France. And that's the way the war went until all the Allied armies landed in Europe and eventually made the end of the Hitler regime and the horror of the Hitler regime. Hitler had something against a lot of people. It depends on who you were. If you were crippled, you went into the concentration camp. If you were a certain part of the Catholic Church, you went into the concentration camp. If you were Jewish, you went into the concentration camp. If you were a gypsy, if you were homosexual, if there's something you didn't like about your nose, and this is not funny, or your chin, you went into a concentration camp. Now, we had heard about concentration camps during the war, that there were certain areas that had these camps. They were all over Germany, they were all over Poland, there were some in France, there were some in Belgium, there were many, many of them. A concentration camp was not a small little prison. It was huge, and it's about bigger than this whole school area, with some kind of housing where these poor devils were kept. And we didn't know anything about a concentration camp. We were busy fighting the war, and as we got closer and closer to Germany, we found out more and more about that there are such camps. Yet we hadn't reached one and we never opened one. Our object was to meet the Russian army at the Elbe River. And when the Allies met the Russian army at the Elbe River, that was going to be the end of World War II. Which is true, that's exactly what happened in Europe. But on the way to the Elbe River, we were out in the field doing whatever we had to do, and suddenly we smelled something that we never smelled before. It was a horrible odor. We didn't make out what it was, and the closer we got to this town that was about 20 miles away, the worse this odor was. If you smelled it, you felt like throwing up and just lying there on the ground. And we know what death meant. We had seen the invasion. There were a lot of guys, our Allied guys that got killed. The Germans got killed. We know about dead horses and dead cows. So we knew what that smell of death was. But nothing like this. And nobody could understand what this was until we got to the town of Nordhausen. Nordhausen is in the middle of Germany's prettiest area, Germany's most cultural area. And it was there that this camp was. We got into the town, the stench of the smell of these cadavers, dead people, was so much that you can't just imagine it. And as we walked into the town, there was the stockade, the fence. Some of the doors were chained. One door was left cut, was open. The reason why that was left open, the German army and the German guards of the concentration camp knew that either the Americans or the Russians were coming into this camp. So they didn't want to they don't want anybody to know about this camp. So they went and they put gasoline and alcohol all over the camp to ignite it once they saw the enemy. We were the German enemy, come to this camp. And we got there before they had a chance to light this camp up. And what happened is all the German guards ran away, took off their uniforms and put on civilian clothes so they should look like civilians. Because they knew if we found all these guards, we would put them on the guard and who knows what we would have done with them, but it wouldn't have been a happy situation. So they ran away, except 2 guards were caught in the concentration camp. And we started to see these skeleton people walking the streets with dirty clothes. They smelled, and we couldn't imagine, what they were until as we got closer and closer to the camp. We saw the whole camp looked like these people, and some of the doors were chained, so we cut the chains. But this one door that was open, we entered the camp, and we saw the people of the camp. And I don't know where they got the strength from. There were 2 guards that were caught in this gang of prisoners, of the concentration camp victims. And these victims jumped on the 2 Germans and they clawed them to death. I don't know where they got the strength to do it, but that's what they did. We cut the gates open, and thousands and hundreds of people would come out of these, afraid to come out because they'd never been out of this camp in maybe 5-7 years. And they started walking the streets. And some of them, besides smelling, they hadn't had any food. We didn't know what the situation with them was with the food until we found out later. They were given a potato a day. They weren't allowed to use they never took a shower. They never were able to wash themselves. They couldn't even go to the bathroom. It was a horrible, horrible thing. And they were walking around now wondering who we were, and we were wondering about who they were, except we knew that they were emaciated. They were all skin and bones. And we didn't know what to do with them, and they were hungry. And what we did, the American Army used to roll with their own supplies. They always had K rations, and sea rations and Hershey bars and stuff like that. And when we saw these poor souls, we started to distribute the rations that we had to them. And that was the worst thing we could have done. Because their stomachs couldn't accept the ham and eggs that we had in cans, or the beans, or whatever food we had, couldn't accept these. And these poor things, we were holding them as we were feeding them, and they died in our arms. You know, some of them. Not all of them, but a lot of them did. We didn't find out that that was the wrong thing to do until days later. But that's what we did, and we let these people walk out. Now what we noticed in town, there were huge buildings, maybe 4 stories high, open. And in there were dead bodies. And they were laid out, stretched out with their arms and their legs spread. And they touching each other. And these cadavers were never buried. And they had ovens, and they would be burning these people as they could. So, but here came now the Americans. So this is all stopped, and then what were we going to do with these bodies? They came in order and from headquarters that said we should get everybody in town out of their house. All the kids, all the people, if they were old, young, it didn't matter. You want to ask me something? No? Okay. I'm sorry. It didn't matter what the ages of the people that lived in, the German people that lived in these houses. They wanted them to see this camp and to go into the camp. And whenever you spoke to a German person in town, they would tell you, we knew nothing about this. And I don't know how they could know nothing about this when we smelled this 20 miles away. So this was like a farce. So they got all these people, they walked them through the camp, and we made a date with them, again, orders from headquarters, that they would, I was an engineer, outfit, a combat engineer, and we had a bulldozer. You know what a bulldozer is? It's like a huge tractor. You know what that is? Anybody know? But it would dig holes, and that's what it was there for. And they digged a huge pit. And the people in town had to go out and get those dead bodies out of these houses and put them in the ground. And they had no identification, nobody knew who they were. All they knew that they were dead and they were lying in these storage bins. And we put lye on their bodies, and we buried these people. But we were so angry at what we saw. I mean, we couldn't imagine that people could do this kind of thing to other people. And we went on our way. We were there for about 2.5, 3 days. We were fighting soldiers, so we didn't have time to stay there and talk to anybody and see what's going to happen. We had to go meet the Russians on the Elbe River, which wasn't too far from where we are. I didn't find out till many years later what the result of us leaving the camp and what happened after that. And what happened is the medics, the medical corps, they were called medics, would come in and they were examining everybody, and they were spraying all kinds of sprays on them to get the worms and whatever germs were on them, trying to clean them up. And then a hospital, an American Field Hospital, opened up after that, and whoever needed that kind of help went in there. It was a terrible, terrible scene that has lasted with me all my life. I've met other soldiers that did the same thing, and some of them cannot talk about. Hold on, we got a telephone call. Okay. I'm sorry. I forgot where it was.
The people who couldn't talk about it.
Oh, yeah.
There are soldiers who
Many
could
soldiers
never talk.
couldn't talk about the concentration camps that they opened. Some of them, when they saw a concentration camp on the TV stream would just get sick. This odor would come back to them, this this thought would always reoccur. And I wasn't one of those. I felt that I wanted to speak about this for years, so everybody should know about the situation that was in Hitler's Germany. And that we should not see this again on the face of the earth. However, I can't say that that's happened because this war is still going on and people are killing each other and being terrible to each other, which is a very sad thing. I was invited last year? Was it last year?
Yeah,
Yeah.
last year.
I've been interviewed by a lot of people, and I'm in a book called The Liberators, and I've been on TV about this. But we were invited, they took 16 liberators throughout the country to Poland. They had the 25th anniversary of survivors in Poland, and in Krakow there was a camp called Auschwitz. And
Can I
next,
see Rajay for a minute? Is Rajay here?
You're interrupting the man.
He's all right.
Auschwitz was the same kind of concentration camp as Nordhausen was, except attached to it was a second concentration camp called Birkenau. And what they would do in Auschwitz with the inmates of the Auschwitz camp, and they wanted, when they wanted to exterminate them, they didn't have enough ovens in Auschwitz to do it. So we have these people march with 1.5 kilometers, roughly about a mile, to Birkenau, and that's where they met their death. And that was called always a death march. Well, this group of people is called the Survival, what's it called? March of the Millions. This was their 25th anniversary. And what they used to do, they used to get survivors of the concentration camp to do this. But they said, we better get the liberators that open up these camps to come down and go through this thing. And so people will know that these are the people that open up the concentration camp. It was a very special moment. So they flew us to Poland. I was one of 16 that was chosen. And it was a wonderful experience. I met guys from all over the country who opened up other concentration camps. We were on, when we went to Poland, I was interviewed by Channel 12. They came to our house and they interviewed me and my wife. And they decided they were going to send 2 reporters to Poland with us. And that's what happened, and they stayed in Poland for a week. They came back and they did a documentary on Channel 12. The 2 reporters that went along with us both won an Emmys for what they did, and the program itself won an Emmy. So 3 Emmys were taken care of. That's like the Oscars, in California. And there we went, and a lot of people, young people from all over the world, were there too. And what they wanted from us to speak to young people about what we saw, what we did, and how we did it, et cetera, et cetera. And it was a moving, very moving moment. And all these hard veterans that went, it moved all of us. And they treated us very nice, and there was a week of this kind of stuff. My position is I want these facts to be known. As long as guys are around like us, we'll be able to talk about it. I talk at other schools, I speak at other libraries, or any other group that wants to speak. They got me. Now, anybody got any questions or comments?
How many concentration camps have you been in?
I've been into 4. We didn't open 4, but I've been in 4. One we opened. Yes, go ahead.
Did you ever meet Hitler?
Say again.
Did you ever meet Hitler?
No, I never met Hitler. If I did, I'd put a bullet in his head in 1 minute. But that was never, I never had an opportunity. Hitler died in a bunker, in a trench underneath that was built for him specially, and he killed himself. He killed himself and his girlfriend in his bunker, and then they set fire to his body. This is the Nazis did that. Berlin was taken by the Russians, and after we met the Russians on the Elbe, we were, my group was one of the first American soldiers to go into Berlin. So we were there, and we were supposed to make a full-power center for the Allies, the French, the English, the Russians, and the Americans. So we got a chance to go to Berlin, which was a really wonderful experience, but we never saw Hitler, we never saw Göring, and these guys either killed themselves or were hung eventually.
You know, I just, can I add a little?
Sure, sure.
Okay. When we were in Poland, we met people, well, we met a woman who grew up in Germany and told us how she lived in the same neighborhood that Hitler, Göring, all the well-known people who wanted to destroy the world, who followed Hitler. And she said that people in the neighborhood, some people thought he was great, and also the people who joined him. And other people were very worried and frightened about what was going on. And she said that her family finally had to move, they had to move away from that area. She said they saw what they were beginning to do. You know, as Mr. Sunshine said, they were rounding up people who were crippled and people who were damaged in any way. So there were some who felt that they had to find some way of escaping from this, although they wouldn't be harmed because they were citizens of Germany and they were healthy. Anyway, I was amazed to meet this woman, and she works very closely with the organization, the March of the Million, who have been doing this marching for 25 years, so that people, again, so that they don't forget, and she speaks for them and gives the story, a story of someone who lived right there, like I think the book you were reading, was it Hannah's Suitcase and Sarah's Key? I don't know if you've read, if people have read Sarah's Key. That's another book about a horror story about what Hitler did to Sarah's family. But this woman is just remarkable, and she's, you know, Mr. Sunshine was busy. There were times that I was able to meet some of these people because he was busy with the soldiers, those who had liberated camps. They were having meetings, they were talking to each other. So I got some information that he didn't get. Okay.
One of the things that happen when you're a combat soldier, when you go into battle, if you have any letters or any literature from where you came from, had to be burned. I knew her before I went into the Army, and we were writing letters to each other, but my letters were burnt. The letters that she got from me, we have every one of them. And what I found out, that my letters, once they were written, they had to be censored. And I thought when they censor a letter, and you know what censored is? You know what that means? Well, I'll just tell you, they had to be read, and if there was something about the town you were in or anything about the war, they were cut out, snipped out or blacked out. And I thought those letters were read by some in headquarters, so, but I was shocked to find out it was my lieutenant that read my letters, and I resented that. I didn't want him to know my business with my girlfriend, you know. But that was one surprise. When I wrote a letter to my wife while I was in service, we had a thing called V-mail. and it was you would write on a piece of paper, and then, show it to them. We're gonna pass some of these out. And it was a
This-
one-page letter
this
that
was
was
the-
photographed.
The size, and the letter was photographed. So, a large letter could be, it could be worked out so that it wouldn't take up much space. And so this is what they called V-mail. This is the envelope, and this is the V-mail letter that Mr. Sunshine, I have many of them that he wrote. They're very sweet letters. But if you wanna, I could pass some around.
Yeah, the V-mail,
Just hold them carefully. And also,
pass them
I can
around.
show you, this was the size of the letters in the beginning. This was the kind of envelope that came to me with a letter from him. And then the person who censored it would stamp it and put their name at the bottom. And when he saw the letters after he came home, he said, "That guy was looking at my mail? Oh, my goodness." It was someone whom, an officer who was very close to him. So that's how he learned. And so I could pass some around so that you could see.
don't read the letters.
There's no time to read the. Anyway, but just remember, this is the one who sends it. All right, I'll pass a few down here, that's one. And then the V-mail. I'll show you some of the V-mail. In fact, Daniel, Charlie, I don't know if you ever saw V-mail.
No.
Did you? No, even the adults in the family.
I have a
It's
question.
about time that I started to show.
During the course of the war,
This is the V-mail.
how did the tone of the letters change
The tone of the letters.
I can't hear you.
to reflect what was happening?
I try to keep Kate out of the letters,
Well,
but it was very hard.
okay.
But the more I
These
saw,
are the V-mails.
the more I was so disappointed in the human race that this can occur in a civilized universe, sort of focus. I was a very bitter guy.
Oh, that's the sister's name? Okay. The sister's name.
Anyone have a question?
And this is the person who censored, that was.
That's Zaire.
Diane?
Zaire.
Zaire?
Raise your hand, Zaire.
No, Erica says.
Oh, Erica.
Why did you put wine on the bodies before you buried them?
I'm sorry.
What?
Why did you put wine on their bodies before you buried them?
Line.
Oh, lime on the body. It was to keep, unfortunately, when they're dead that long, the cadavers, they're like food for the insects and stuff like that. And the odor would have been even worse than it was. So the lime sort of preserved that factor, so people wouldn't have to smell this. I want to tell you a little about what they did in Nordhausen. Let me give you a little bit of history about Hitler and what happened. After World War I, and that was in 1918 with an armistice, and we still honor that day. The Germans were not allowed to have any army. They weren't allowed to have any guns. All that was taken away from them. No, they weren't allowed to have any airplanes. So what they did, they invented the rocket. And they started making rockets in 1936. The rockets, the German rockets, eventually they used them as a war item, and they would bomb England with them. They had two of these rockets. One was divided, they called the V1, and the second one was called the V2, which is more powerful than the V1. It's these rockets, and the makers of these rockets in Germany that helped us go to the moon and helped us in all the rocketry, not only us, but the Russians.
High five.
And that's what they were doing at this factory. The factory first employed the employees at the time of Nordhaus. But Arthur Rudolph, who was the head of the concentration camp, said, why are we paying employees? They could go into the army. I have plenty of slaves here. So the concentration camp became the place where they went for people that worked there day and night, got very little food, and suffered these terrific, things that they had to do and live with. I don't know how they do it. But that's where rockets came from, and that's where rockets started, and that's why you have rockets today.
This is the kind of.
Sorry, you have it.
As you were walking through concentration camps, and you cut open the gate, get a chance. Where were the Nazis at that time?
There were none. They ran away.
Oh, they ran away?
Yeah, everybody ran except two of the guards were caught. And they were killed by the inmates of the concentration camp. There was like a bunch of ants crawling on a piece of sugar. That, all their strength.
This is what in there. What I did.
Listen to the
just
question.
write, what the contents. And we had been reading, we still can't broken it. But this
Yes,
is,
there are people still alive, yeah.
this is how it was.
And so there are people in the concentration camps still alive.
That
I'll get you in a
changed
minute.
from this. I guess
Go.
they needed this.
How old were you when you discovered these concentration camps?
Well, I spent my, maybe 19 going on 20, that kind of stuff.
And what year was this?
The year was 1945. That's the year the war ended. It ended in the summer of May of 45, and it ended when we met the Russians on the Elbe River. That was the end of the war. Hitler was dead, and a lot of the other guys were dead, and all the other ones, Goring and Goebbels, and they were captured. And there was a trial held for them years later, and then they were punished for their deeds.
If you have any more questions, you have about 5 minutes before the bell's going to ring to ask. So please make sure that you ask the
Okay, you.
questions.
I'm
So
sorry.
if you go to
There, right?
Zaire.
Okay.
So if you go to the concentration camps today, will it still be open?
Yeah, they're now like museums.
So it's like, everything's the same?
Oh, yeah. It's a museum.
You ever been inside the gas chamber?
I was inside a gas chamber. It wasn't functioning, of course, but they had them in every concentration camp. There were the showers that they used to let these people to, and there was a gas that they...
Was there bodies in there? Was there bodies in there?
No, not even that. They removed the bodies and put them in these storage units. Wait, I'm gonna want to somebody else. Okay.
So, since you said everything was the same, but is the blood still there from?
No, that's all cleaned away. See, they used to take, if you were crippled and you had crutches or your wheelchair or you needed this thing, you'll see all that stuff, they used to take all that stuff away. Because if you couldn't walk, they had no use for you, so they'd kill you. And if you had eyeglasses, they took that away. If you had false teeth, they took that away. If you had gold in your teeth, they took that away. And all that, there's, like in a museum, they have all this stuff in all the concentration camps that you would go to. There's one in that corner.
Have you seen or killed any Nazi soldiers?
I cannot hear you.
Say it one more time.
Have you seen or killed any Nazi soldiers?
Have you seen or killed any Nazi soldiers?
I don't like to talk about that. I was in the infantry, and we fought. When you fight, you're out there to kill people. But I don't want to talk about that. Sorry.
Good question.
Yes.
Did you see how the guards of the Nazis or the Nazi uniforms
Do you know how they look like?
Yeah, of course. I recognize it in a minute. Yeah, that was, yeah. Similar to that. The army would have a blue, the Gestapo had a blue, black uniform, the army had a blue uniform. Yeah, you know.
In this book, it shows me that some of the Nazis had a helmet with a spike on top of it.
That's correct. That's the old German helmet.
Are there still some people alive that was held hostage?
Please, a little louder.
Are there people still alive that was held in?
Hostage in a concentration camp? Absolutely. Yeah, there are some survivors. Not many, but they're getting scarcer and scarcer, you know. As we get older, we're going to be gone, and so people won't have a direct connect with this thing.
Do you know the guy who used to be in the army? His name is Jack.
Jack?
Yeah.
There were a lot of Jacks in my outfit. I wouldn't know. What is his last name?
I forgot, but all I know is his name was Jack. He said back in the days he used to do all the Nazi stuff and all that. And he showed his uniforms.
Well, I would have to know his last name and what outfit he was with. You know, I was with the 294th Combat Engineer outfit. When he opened up Nordhausen, we were attached to the 3rd Armored Division. We would be attached to different divisions, the 101st Airborne, the 82nd Airborne. So we went with different divisions all the time. So that's the way that works with us. So if you got a guy named Jack, you got to have a last name and what he did and where he fought.
I wonder, is that someone who's a relative of yours, or someone you know? No?
Just close.
Is what?
He's just very close to me.
Very close to you. They're very close.
Oh, very close.
So if you find out the information
yes.
and give it to Ms. Cassidy, and then I'll relay it, and I'll relay it back.
What happened? Don, you got something else? Go ahead.
Okay,
Okay.
Were you proud that you let the people go through concentration camps?
Were you proud that you let people go from the concentration camps?
Was I proud?
Yes.
Yes, very. I mean, the suffering that you saw over there was unconscionable. Go ahead.
Did you feel, see, or take any property of Hannah Brady or see any family member?
Of what?
Hannah Brady?
No.
No?
I don't know who Hannah Brady is. That's your book, right?
That's the book they're reading.
Yeah, that's what you did. No, I don't know the book, I don't know where they were stationed, I don't know where they were born, what
They were
town
born in
came
Novo
from.
Mesto, Czechoslovakia.
Oh, the Czechoslovakia.
Mhm. And they
This is one of
went to
the-
Auschwitz. They ended
Went
up
to
in,
Auschwitz,
first they
yeah.
went to Theresienstadt for 2 years, the brother and sister, Hannah and George Brady, and then they went to, guys help me out, they went to Auschwitz. They were
Yeah.
both transported to Auschwitz, and even their parents.
Well, Auschwitz is now, the camp is still there. So is Birkenau, still there. But Auschwitz has a museum. I resented that. When I went to Auschwitz, I didn't see the rubber building, the wooden building and the wooden cots, beds that these people had to sleep in together, 5 and 6 of them in a, looked like a stage. I saw brick buildings and because it's a museum, but I resented that. I didn't like that.
Hold on, everyone, let's give a hand and thank our presenters.